perspectives that each of you have developed as philanthropists, and in some cases, volunteer fundraisers on behalf of the organizations you've served over many decades of volunteerism and generosity. The goal of our dialogue today at the Fundraising Summit is to talk about how we together can grow philanthropy so that the nonprofit sector can have an even greater impact on our nation and our world. And so the wisdom that you share will be extremely helpful to each of us as we go forward in service of those missions that we're committed to as individuals and as professionals. The first question I'd like to ask is about your personal satisfaction. I'm going to start with you, Henry, and then we'll just continue down the road. We'll rotate who begins with answering the questions. What satisfies you as a philanthropist?
Matt, I would say the biggest satisfaction I have is knowing the contribution that our foundation makes is put to good use, that it's appreciated by the recipient and needed, and I think that's very important. My main reason for giving is because I feel we have a debt to the Kansas City community. I mean, without the community accepting our business, there would be no business. And so we just want to see the contributions we make be needed, be useful, be successful, and that brings lots of satisfaction.
Thank you very much. Jeanne, what about you? What satisfies you as a philanthropist?
I love being a philanthropist, but more than that, I love being a fundraiser. So you'll hear both sides of the coin today, and they're going to blend and overlap. I'll try to keep it straight for you, but I'm a fundraiser at heart, and the philanthropy came later in my years. I began fundraising when my oldest son was in kindergarten. He's now 45. He went to Barstow School, and a board member asked me if I would chair the fundraising for his class. I said, absolutely not. I said, I can't do that. And he said, do you believe in this organization? Oh yeah, best school in town. He said, are you asking for money for you? I said, of course not. You're it. Well, I've been doing this all those years, and I find that in Kansas City, it has become such a part of my life. But what I also want to tell you is some of our philanthropy goes outside of Kansas City. So some of the stories that I'm going to tell you, you're going to want to identify who is that organization. The truth is you won't be able to, because I'm going to be a little mysterious about that, but I do have some interesting things to share. For me, it has given me an opportunity to be involved, and I'm involved with people who really are family to me. That's a very rewarding part of giving. The other part is the mission. I am very discerning about the organizations I support. Because many years ago, my husband and I defined philanthropy, and it's a short list. Now, that's not to say we don't make smaller donations. I do memorials, of course, and I do honorariums. But we have defined, starting with our church, we have defined what we want to support because we want to make a difference. And then when I make a gift, I really am an all-in person. So I am involved in the organization. And, you know, obviously, nobody knows Jeanne without knowing that Jeanne went to Avila. I mean, that's just a given. So that one I'll identify. But honestly, it's fulfilling. You look at the community and you know that you've done something that means something to somebody else. But Adrian talked about what it means to people and to the individual who gives. So it's really a very beautiful marriage to be able to give to something or to someone and to make a difference. And also for me, it defines my spirituality because I feel a very strong need to give back to the community and to help those who might not be able to help themselves.
What satisfies you as a philanthropist, Mr. Dunn?
Well, probably first of all, it's a lot more fun giving money away than making it. But also, when you look at today's society, it's pretty broken. I learned an awful lot about needs with about 6 years on the board of the United Way. Had the opportunity to chair it. They had 150 different organizations that they were contributing to. I learned an awful lot about all the problems. And I also realized that in the Middle West, for some particular reason, whenever there is a need, it seems like people respond to the need as long as it's orchestrated as to what the problem is, what the needs are, what will be accomplished by raising a certain amount of money. And it is amazing to me what the generosity is of the people in this Middle Western area. So, that's probably the thing I enjoy most is when I see a need and when I see it's well orchestrated, I can see where a program is well run. Many of these organizations, as I learned when I was involved in the United Way, have great programs. They may not have all the horsepower to raise money. If they can orchestrate their program, define it with the right pay statement, it's amazing how people will respond. That's what I've enjoyed is the needs and meeting those needs in our society.
Thank you all for that perspective. Jeanne, I want to ask you to take the lead in the next question. Tell us about your most rewarding giving experience. What giving experience was most meaningful and rewarding to you?
Well, I tell you, probably one of the most meaningful experiences that my family experienced after 5 really nasty, healthy boys, all of a sudden we had a little girl. But the doctor called me about 2 hours after the baby was born, said, I wish you'd help me come back down to the hospital and explain to your wife. They didn't call them Down syndrome, they called them mongoloids at the time. And I thought, are you kidding me? I don't even know what the word means. But my whole family learned from our daughter, Mary, who will be dead, well, she would be 47 years old if she'd made it. She made it to almost 40. But she taught our whole family there are great needs in society, and we have an obligation to help those in need. And it was probably, instead of a disaster, it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me or my entire family in recognizing society has its problems. We have an obligation, if we've been fortunate, to help organizations in addressing those needs and making life easier. Thank you for sharing that.
Jeanne, tell us about your most rewarding giving experience.
That's a hard question, but I do have an answer. It's no surprise. I am an Avila grad, but I've been on this campus for years. Now, it did not take me 40 years to get my degree. I brought my older son here when he was 4 years old to take piano lessons right here in Bloch Theater. He used to perform here on this stage competitively. And he took piano lessons here through his senior year in high school. Fortunately, by then he could drive, so I was not driving him to piano lessons. But when I was, I had my younger son with me, and he and I would play on campus. We'd slide down the hill on snowy days, we'd play ping pong, I was everywhere. And I made some observations. I thought, this is a really plain-looking school. But everybody's happy. There are students here, but it's plain. Would I want to go to a plain? I'm a very visual, very creative person. I thought, no, I probably wouldn't want to go here. Fast forward, when my older son went to college, I went back to school to finish something I had started when I graduated from high school. It was a very natural choice to come to Avila. I was comfortable here. I enrolled in school, and then I quickly learned that this very plain-looking school was a very difficult school. I had gone to a large university, and I was taught by teachers, TAs, teachers' assistants. And here I had professors. I wrote until I thought my fingers would bleed. I studied hard. I had courses. I thought, I can't get through this, and I did. Sister Marie sitting here smiling, I did. Avila, I saw this wonderful school, this wonderful opportunity, but it was still plain. And I said to myself, if there ever comes a time when I can help this plain school be a pretty school, I'm going to do it. That's the history. Shortly after Dr. Slipitza came on campus, my good friend Jessie Fuller, who's here today, called a meeting with Ron and Jeanne, and we had a wonderful lunch. They showed me pictures of what the campus could look like if I considered a donation. I actually have the original rendering of the Jayhawk out in front of the school that shows, it just blew my heart wide open, and I said, yes, but I don't have any money. I have to go home and talk to the banker. So I did, and over dinner, I said, you know, honey, there's a project at Avila. I said, we have an opportunity if we help pay for the front of the school to enhance it and make it beautiful. I have to tell you, that was probably the most significant donation we've ever made because I felt it. I had seen the vision, I visualized what it might look like, and it turned out to be everything I expected and more. But there was one caveat. I think I probably called Ron and Jessie the next day, and I said, it's a go, let's go, we're going to do it. But I said, there's one thing, and I have to tell you what it is. It's the legend of the flagpole. Out in front on the Jayhawk, when I would come to campus, all the years that I was coming for piano lessons, then as a student, the flag clanged against the pole, and it made a very distinctive sound. And I would say to myself, you know, I belong here. I love it here. And that sound meant something to me. So I said to Ron and Jessie, it's a go. We're going to build the plaza, but don't touch the flagpole. So when you drive out and you look at the front of the school, you'll see the flagpole. If it's windy, I hope it'll clang for you. I do believe, although nobody's ever admitted it, they toned it down somehow. Or my hearing's not quite as good. But nonetheless, the legend of the flagpole is true. I hope it carries forward because as we go through some of the things we're going to talk about, traditions are really important. In fact, I think we'll talk about this now. When we did the signage out front, Bob Hartsook said, you know, Jeanne, this is going to become a photo op. I said, yeah, right. You know, sometimes you can't take Bob too seriously the first time. But 99.9% of the time, he's spot on. Shortly after he told me that, a picture came across my computer with a bride and groom standing on top of the Avila sign. So many good things have happened to Avila that I've been able to witness, things that I've been able to see and feel, and that gives me a great deal of satisfaction. It's not about me or having my name on it. It's really not. In fact, I will tell you another secret. Don't tell anybody. I didn't expect my name to be that large. I actually thought there'd be a little plaque on the back. Nonetheless, I'm grateful. I'm so proud of it. And since all of these things have transformed Avila, people have said to me today, I have a guest here from Chicago, she said, it's beautiful. Avila is beautiful. It's still a wonderful school, but now it's a beautiful school.
Excellent. Thank you so much. About your most rewarding giving experience.
Okay, but before I do, I'd like to just mention that I gather most of the people here are from Kansas City, but this city would not be what it is today without Bill Dunn. Their footprint is on all the great buildings in town, and they raises a lot of money for different organizations, but it's a great family, and they've done a lot for this community. And I know you all know that anyway, but now as far as our favorite charities, our foundation is a little different than most. We have 3 legacy organizations, and these are 3 organizations that we give most of our money to. That are the ones basically that I've been involved in at more or less the present time. And the 3, should I mention the 3? The 3 are the Nelson Art Gallery, the Bloch School at UMKC, and St. Luke's Hospital at the Plaza. And we give a lot outside of those 3, but they all have to be in Kansas City. Nothing, all for Kansas City. And we get a lot of satisfaction out of those 3 organizations. We've run into problems on occasion where we wanted to do something, for example, for the university, and they say, but we're part of the state university. We're part of the University of Missouri. We want to give raises out into the business school. They had a freeze on raises, so they said, you can't give a raise. The dean said, I can't give you a good school if I can't raise my faculty's salaries. And we wanted to pay them. And but they finally let us go ahead and do that. The challenges we face are interesting, and we love it. We've got David Miles with me today, who's president of both we have 2 foundations. One is the H&R Bloch Foundation, and one is Marion and Henry Bloch Foundation, my wife, and David runs both of them, and we get a lot of satisfaction out of helping people.
Thank you for that. Let me ask another question, and we're not asking this question to try to cast a negative light on organizations that haven't done well. In fact, I'd ask that you not share identifying information about the organizations. But this would be helpful for us as fundraisers so that we can learn from things that others may have not done as well as they could have. Tell us, and I'll ask you to start, Mr. Bloch, about your worst giving experience.
I made a little note on it. And I wouldn't want to use any names to talk about that, but I think the worst giving experience that our foundation has had is dealing with a request that was both dishonest, unethical, and disrespectful. And that doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it hurts.
Good counsel for all of us. Jeanne, tell us about your least satisfactory giving experience.
I have one, and the first thing I'm going to tell you is I'll be very obscure in my comments. There is no identity. And the second thing I'll tell you, it wasn't in Kansas City. My husband and I felt passionately about an organization who was embarking on a capital campaign. The economy, this was before 2008, the economy was on a roll. Our company was on a roll. We were feeling great about the world. and we gave them $1 million. We knew that the project would happen. The project took a different twist and a different turn. We were okay with that. That was a good thing. Everything happens for a reason. The project got bogged down a little bit in some political discussions, so it didn't happen quite on time. Well, as time goes on, other things happen, and we became a little distracted. Not that there was an integrity issue, there absolutely was not. But the issue was, when the project came to fruition, our $1 million gift had not been recognized. And that was interesting. And that's an interesting thing for a fundraiser. And I came into discovering this was almost happenstance, because I was involved and I saw some naming opportunities, and I thought, oh, that's an interesting one, and oh, that's even a little bit more interesting because we had all been involved in the original project. So what does a fundraiser do with that kind of information? Not wanting to cause a scene, but yet there's a lesson to be learned in that, and I was entitled to at least an explanation. Well, I asked the right question of the right people, and there was a lot of backpedaling, and it all worked out. It's fine. I'm fine. They're fine. The project is beautiful. In fact, it really received some national recognition. But as a fundraiser, I thought long and hard about that. We can't overlook a $100 gift. People would say to me, but we didn't see you at such and such party. You weren't at this kind of event and that kind of event. And I thought, that's not right. But because I'm a fundraiser and I forgave them for it, and I understand there was a lot of transition going on at the time, I accepted it. But as fundraisers, we cannot allow that to happen. And if it happened to someone else who's a major donor, they probably would never see that person again. So I chalked it up as a lesson learned, and I took some responsibility because I could have followed up on it. I really could have asked more questions sooner, which I didn't do. It has a happy ending. Everybody's well and good. But it was an unpleasant experience. And I think the day that I realized what had happened was the most unpleasant point of all. I had to talk myself out of being quite angry. And I didn't allow that. I just moved on. But again, I think it is a lesson we all have to learn. No donation is certainly too large to be recognized, and no donation is too small to be recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Dunn, tell us about your least positive giving experience.
I can tell you about a situation that was disastrous and it turned the right way. And this is a little bit of a story that really goes back to the help of Henry Bloch. He had been a past chairperson of the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce. I had been. And there was a situation in the state of Missouri that they could not get a bill passed that was going to be a disaster for the whole state of Missouri. And there was a meeting at the Chamber of Commerce, and they said, what do we do? I said, well, I've made enough trips down to Jefferson City. You need to realize that the unions control the legislature. And that's the only way they said, well, we don't talk to the unions. There's been a lot of very tough labor negotiations prior to that time. I said, well, I think what we really need to do is let's put together a management group along with some top labor leaders. I called Meyer Goldman, who'd been trying to put together some sort of a cooperative effort between labor and management for quite a while. Well, the net result was Henry is given his time and efforts about everything that's ever happened in this community. Henry and I and Jerry Scott, who happened to be the chairperson of the chamber, we went down to Jefferson City, and I'd asked Meyer Goldman, I said, you get the three most influential labor leaders in the state of Missouri to go with us. And actually, I don't know whether Henry will remember this, but the legislators had never had labor management ever ask them for anything. They were shocked. This bill that they couldn't pass, they passed it in probably about 1 week, where they've been struggling for a year. And the union people, they came back to town. This is the other part of the story for fundraising purposes. They set up a labor management organization where there were co-chairs, one from labor, one from management. I guess I couldn't get out of it because I co-chaired it for 15 years. But one of the situations that arisen where 2 of these youth programs and different 501c3s had been working together, and they were doing very well, except they were needing some money that would take care of what they were trying to do. It could be paid off by the pledges that were moving right along. Well, one bank said yes, another bank said yes, a third bank said, it's a terrible loan, I'm not going to give anything. Well, the other co-chairperson from labor happened to hear me complaining about this, and he said, do you need some help? This man happened to be the head of the hoisting engineers. I said, yeah, I could really use some help. Well, he called the head of the bank. He said, do I still have $100 million in my pension? I said, yes, Mr. Long, and that was who it was. And he said, when you tell the boss at your bank that it's gone tomorrow if he doesn't give that loan to these 2 persons. They called back in about 15 minutes and said they have their loan.
Great story. I want to sort of take a turn here and ask you to talk a little more specifically about the fundraising profession. Many of us in the room are professional fundraisers, either voluntarily or as a full-time position, and your perspective will be helpful to us. And I want to start with you, Mr. Dunn. I'd like to ask you what mistakes you've seen fundraising professionals make. And are there parts of their work where you think sometimes fundraising professionals drop the ball?
Well, I think that if all of the fundraising professionals paid attention to Bob Hartsook, your organization.
Where's the applause for that?
But really, when there is a need that doesn't succeed, in many cases, the board members or maybe the professional doesn't understand how important their program is. They haven't well defined it, put together a proper case statement. Now, Bob Hartsook taught me a lot. The first time I ever met him, he will remember it was way back when I was a lot younger. He was a few pounds lighter. But really, it's amazing. The ones that fail are the ones that, there's several factors. You know, maybe they've had a past campaign where they never let their funders know what was going on and never let the funders know how much they appreciated what they had given and what the results were. And you have to stay in touch with their funders. In fact, in many cases, in our situation, like this young lady, I enjoy raising money more than I enjoy giving it away, but it seems like I spend half my time. In fact, about 2 hours before I came out here was another not-for-profit that was trying to raise a lot of money, and they were well on their way. But I think a lot of the issues that develop is not defining what the problem is, not letting people know the history of the organization that is trying to raise the money, their past successes, what they've been able to accomplish, and really not being identified with the public in the right way. Once you have funders, you need to let them know how important, whether your $100 is important or it all adds up to a success. And I think a lot of failures, and there aren't too many that I've been aware of in this Kansas City area, because it's an area, if you define your cause, let people know how important it is, what the need is, and what the result will be when you have a proper campaign, you have a success. But you'll have a failure if you don't follow all those steps.
Thank you. Tell us about your perspective on where you see fundraisers dropping the ball or making mistakes.
You know, I think we're all very savvy fundraisers, and yet we do make mistakes. We do drop the ball in ways that sometimes catch us a little bit by surprise. I have an organization that I'm particularly fond of. We just wrapped up a capital campaign, and it was successful. And they decided they needed a very large art piece to memorialize someone who is no longer with us. Well, the timing was off. The timing was off. The campaign was finished. The person who is not with us any longer has been gone for a while. And the fundraising became a secondary thought. It was about timing. And I think as we look out into our future and take the long look, we have to time our projects and understand what our goals are so that we bundle them together appropriately. Because this project is successful, but it's not as successful as it would have been had it been part of the campaign on a more timely basis. Another thing that I think is very important, and this I think starts at the board level, that those of us who are interacting with the public need to understand the institutions in order to embrace the stories. What have you seen at this institution that will capture somebody's imagination and allow them to feel? Well, when I get involved with an organization, I am so passionate about it, I can't help but give. I'm constrained by money. If I had all the money in the world, I'd give it away because it's who I am and what I like to do. We have to be passionate about our organizations, both as donors and as fundraisers. But there's no better way to communicate that passion than through the stories we tell. And I have a story to tell you. And it was here at Avila when I was a senior, finishing my communications degree, my bachelor's, and I was taking a very late afternoon course. I came out of the classroom and I was getting in my car at the bottom of Avila, there's up the hill there, and a car pulled in next to me. I didn't know who the people were. There was a man driving. There was a little boy peering out the window, just watching the crowd, watching the students come down the hill. And there was a baby in the back seat. The child was asleep. The little boy spotted his mother. He bolted out of the car, ran up the hill. They saw each other. He dropped his backpack, or she dropped her backpack, picked up the child, hugged him, and they walked down to the bottom of the hill to the car. But here's where the plot thickens. The man got out of the car, embraced his wife, helped her get in the car. He took his backpack out of the car and walked up the hill to class. Parents trying to get an education. I'm chilly. This story, I don't know who the people, I never ever want to know because it's so poignant to me to see that these parents were trying to educate. I assume that they worked all day. The mother drove away. The father went off to class. And I thought about, this is Avila. We help people. And that's why I was just beginning to get involved, but I knew that the mission of this school was something that I embraced. And to be able to tell those stories, to other stories, there's so many of them, but be able to tell a story as a fundraiser is very impactful for your audience. So I think fundraisers are missing the boat. If they don't dig in and find something, you have to do it with sincerity, because nothing falls on deaf ears worse than a bad presentation. So you have to be careful. But find a story that you can tell about your organization that you believe in. Another thing, I don't think we're as creative as we should be. And we're just very, very creative people, but we don't expand our wings. I had a friend who works for a nonprofit, and he was going to be here today, and I thought I might see him further underneath the seat so he would self-identify, because this is my most creative story from a professional fundraiser. He called me one day and he said, Jeanne, I have something I want to suggest to you. And I said, that's fine. He said, if I remember correctly, Avila is 100 years old in 2016. I said, yeah, I think you're right. Well, he said, I happen to know where there is a bottle of wine that's 100 years old in 2016. He said, don't you think you should buy that for Ron and give it to him as a gift? Oh, I said, that's amazing. That is terrific. Now I said, how can I buy this bottle of wine? Oh, he said, you can't. It's at an auction. You'll have to bid on it. He said, you know, it's really going to go for a very high price. He said, you know, 100 bottles, a 100-year-old bottle of wine is just exactly in 2016. That's pretty valuable. He said, what's your top price? Well, I said, you know, I hadn't thought about that. But I gave him a number. I don't even remember what the number was. He called me the next day. Jeanne, you won that bottle. I said, great, how much was it? Just exactly the amount of money. It's a true story. But that was creative. That is my very favorite creative fundraising story. He connected the dots. He took information that he knew. He took a donor who said, you know, doesn't say no to much. And he said, why not? I'll go for it. He had nothing to lose. So we as fundraisers have to look for opportunities like that. It's about connecting the dots.
Thank you for sharing that. Those are great stories. Mr. Bloch, I want to ask you now, what mistakes and how can we learn?
I asked that question to the president of our foundation, and this is his reply. He thought fundraising professionals can make the mistake of not focusing on the long-term relationship, and fundraising professionals should focus on creating a long-term relationship with donors, not just securing a one-time gift. They should be interested in, which sounds logical to me, the long range, not just today.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. I want to now ask an even more personal. Yes, Bob.
Can I, while you have Mr. Bloch.
Yes.
I really appreciate what you said. Oh, I'm leaving it online. That's good. Henry, when you talked about the one where you were very disappointed, and I felt that. You said that they were dishonest. I mean, you went through 3 different issues. And unfortunately, I see a lot of bad stuff, too. And there's a lot of good, but there's some really disheartening things. Do you recall how you discovered those issues, Henry? And I may be asking you something I'm not prepared for. Maybe my friend here can help us. But you know, I don't think anybody in this room intentionally is dishonest. But maybe they pushed the button a little far. Maybe they go a little too. Do you remember any of that you want to share?
I think probably just the way the fundraiser approaches it and talks about it, that it becomes apparent that it's not honest and true and so on. I think you can tell that it basically wanted some money. I think they're probably good fundraisers and bad and not so good fundraisers.
Thank you. I'm sorry, man.
No, that's okay. That's
That's
okay.
a line of thought.
Yes, please.
And I touched on this a little bit about traditions.
My son graduated from Princeton in '92. In fact, we each got our bachelor's degree at the same time. And Princeton just is steeped in tradition, but there's one I want to mention to you that was so interesting. He goes back every year for homecoming. And as part of this, they have the Pea Parade, where by classes they line up and march through Princeton. I have not seen it. But he goes back specifically to march in the Pea Parade. P for Princeton. Well, it could be something else. I just want to be clear. The thing that was so notable, he called and he'd say, Mom, the parade is led by the oldest living alum. And that was so meaningful to him. It surprised me a little bit. And he would send me a picture. The man walked the parade in the beginning, and then he rode in a golf cart, and then, unfortunately, he wasn't there. But that man became so important to the traditions of the parade that the graduates went back just to interact with him. It became a tradition, a meaningful tradition. And that's particularly in an educational setting. We have to have traditions. It's so important for people to identify. And I don't know this, but I suspect that that gentleman was philanthropic to the organization.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. I want to now step yet another step into more of a personal question, because I think all of us think not just about how we can help others give, but how we can model the kind of behavior that we would like others to engage in on behalf of our missions. I want to ask you to talk about how you have taught your children and your grandchildren to give. And I'm going to ask you in just a minute, Mr. Bloch, to go first, but I want to reflect that I worked at the Bloch School. I remember an award that was given, the Marion and Henry Bloch Community Service Award, and I remember that award was created by your children as an anniversary gift for you and Marion, because they thought that it would be a way to honor others who were alumni, who exemplify the kind of community service you yourselves lived out. I don't know if that award is still given, but I thought it was a great example of how you truly had taught them. But tell us about how you have taught your children and grandchildren.
We have 4 children, 13 grandchildren, and 11 great-grandchildren. And you're right, I am very interested in their contributing money to worthwhile charities. But a long time ago, when they were much younger, I'm talking about our children now, they had opportunities to contribute. And they would always ask me if I would make a contribution to the XYZ charity. And finally, I came across an idea that seemed to work. I said, I will pay half that you pay. One of my daughters said, Dad, would you contribute $1,000 to the XYZ charity? Which didn't mean a lot to me. And I said, no. I said, but if you will contribute $500, I will contribute $500. And she said, oh, I wanted you to contribute it all. But eventually it worked. And then I formed a community foundation, a donor advised fund, and established one as gifts to my children from time to time, and that made a big difference. And now they've become active in donating time to different charities and money. And I think starting at an early age and getting involved is very worthwhile. And
Have you seen that extend then to their children and their children's children?
Yeah, I have. That's great. Even our grandchildren have started. And sometimes when we make gifts to them at birthdays or whatnot, instead of giving them the present, we add money to their community foundation, their donor advised fund. And so they can, but many spend their time at schools and libraries helping out, and they seem to appreciate giving.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Jeanne, tell us about how you have worked to share the love of giving with your family.
Mine is really very simple. By example, my older son, I didn't know this for a long, long time, solicits major gifts for Princeton. My daughter-in-law called me last year and said that she was considering fundraising for the kindergarten class where the kids attend school in California. But I do have an example to share with you of an experience I had with my grandchildren. We were walking down the street. They're very young. Ella was probably 4 and he would have been 6. We were walking down Michigan Avenue, and unfortunately in Chicago, there are homeless people all along Michigan Avenue now. And Preston, the older boy, said to me, "Nana, you've got to give him money. You've got to help him." I said, "No, we're not going to do that." And I explained to him that there are ways that we help homeless people, and we encourage them to go to a church right there on Michigan, and they will help. And I said, "But we can't give them money directly because often they won't use it appropriately." And he accepted that. 2 years later, she was 6, and he was 8. We were in New York, and Ella popped up. We walked by a homeless person, and she popped up. She said, "You know, Nana, you can't give him any money." She said, "He will not use it appropriately. You have to find him a church." True story. Absolutely true. So kids learn, I think, when we do the right thing, they just get it by osmosis. But you have to explain to them the why, and if they can accept the why, they understand. But my kids and my grandchildren know that I'm very involved in the nonprofit world.
That's excellent. Mr. Dunn, how have you sought to teach your family, your children, and their children about the value and joy of giving?
I had a very good example in my father, although I knew that he gave to a lot of charities. He never wanted anybody to ever know about it. And I really didn't know the extent of it until he passed away. And the principal of a public school that was a couple blocks from our office stopped in. And he said, "We sure miss your father." And I said, "Well, I sure do, but why are you here, and tell me why you're concerned?" He said, "Well, I guess your father never told you. He came to see me many years ago when I first became principal, and he said, I grew up in this area. I realized these children may need food, they may need clothing, and I wanted to set up a program with you that if they need coats or hats, whatever, or if they're hungry and they need food." He took care of this whole public school for many years. I never knew about it. But he also had told us before he died, he said, "Uncle Sam isn't going to get any money when I die." And I said, "Well, how does that happen?" He said, "Well, I will have given it all away." Well, he had given it all away, except what he had left. He set up a foundation. And it became very easy for me when I bought my brother's family out in 1974. My 5 sons each had a percentage of the company, and I said, "You know, my dad believed very much that if you're in a community and if you're doing well, you need to contribute to the community. So we're going to give at least 10% of our taxable income to charity every year. I had no complaints from any of my 5 sons, and they thought it was a great idea also. We finally, a few years later, we set up a foundation, which is called the Dunn Family Foundation. I think my 5 sons are well aware of the needs of a company to contribute to a community. I'm going to have to leave it up to them. I have 20 grandchildren. I'm going to let each one of them do the job that I did with them to convince their children that they better be aware of the fact they've been very fortunate and they need to contribute to problem solving in the community wherever they're based.
Yes. Thank you.
And they are not organized charities, but
That's okay.
years ago when the baseball team played baseball on Brooklyn Avenue, I would take the children to the baseball game occasionally. There was a place you could park, but besides that, most of the homes around there accept people to park on their yard. And our children always looked for the poorest. They wanted to pick out the poorest family house to park at, to pay them whatever it was, 50 cents or so to park there. And then another example was, I remember we were in New York on a vacation once, and our children would save part of their lunch, part of their dinner, or lunch, whatever we were getting, put it in a box, and there are always poor people sitting on steps in New York, and they'd go, and we'd walk back to the hotel, and they'd give the food or whatever to people. So they, I think it was good training for young people. But it was their idea, not mine.
Great examples of generosity learned at home. I want to ask a final question, and I wish we could spend the whole evening here, but we have a schedule. And I'm going to preface it with a couple of comments. I'm going to push you in this question to be as specific as you can in your response, because I think it will be really helpful to us in the room to get a lens into how you feel about your giving. I also want to let you know that if there's anything else you'd like to share that you thought about in response to some of the other questions, that you can do that. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Dunn. I'd like to ask you to tell us, what do you believe the largest impact you've made through your philanthropy is? And again, be as specific as you can. What's the largest impact you've made through your philanthropy?
You mean as far as charity or what?
As far as your support financially and voluntarily of nonprofit organizations, what's the largest difference you think you've made?
I think it has made my 5 sons very much aware of the needs in a community and the obligation, if you're fortunate, that you need to help resolve needs. And there are so many needs in our society. We meet 4 times a year, and all 5 of my sons, they contribute to the meeting. They show up at the meetings, they do research with the different charities, and we try to give to at least 400 different not-for-profit organizations each year in a meaningful fashion. And we become aware through research and doing a lot of work. My youngest son and I spend half of our days just on research and meeting with different not-for-profit organizations. And it makes us aware of problems in today's society, how important it is to address these problems, what will happen to our society if we don't address it. So I think that as far as becoming aware of needs, I think that is a problem that I think our society needs to be aware of all the problems that exist out there. in that there is a need for people who are more fortunate to help.
Thank you for sharing that. Jeanne, let me ask you, what is the most significant difference you believe you've made through your giving?
I hope I'm not going to be boastful because I don't intend it that way at all. I'm a volunteer. And when I write a check, they also get me. I'm an all-in person and I want to help. I really want to be involved in the organizations I believe in. And I am. I'm proud of that. I hope I do make a difference. And if I don't, they'll probably boot me out. I'm not afraid of any of them. They'll just tell me, Bob Hartsook will say, get lost. But the truth is, I enjoy giving of my time. To me, that's almost more important than my money, because somebody else has money, but I'm willing to volunteer. I have had young people say to me, I can't get a job. I graduated from college and I have this wonderful degree, this wonderful education. I can't get a job. I have no experience, and boy, do I have a deal for you. I said, go find your favorite nonprofit and embed yourself in there and take your expertise and share it with them. You'll come away with experience. You'll learn a lot, you'll give back, and you'll have something to put on your resume. Now, I can't tell you that anybody ever took me up on that, but I mean it very sincerely. You get to practice your leadership skills, your writing skills, your accounting skills, all the things that Sister Marie wants us to take away from Avila University, you can practice in a nonprofit organization as a volunteer. So I personally think volunteerism is a critical part of nonprofit success.
Thank you. Mr. Bloch?
There's an old saying that goes, it's better to give than to receive. And I think that's true. And I think that Bill touched on this. I think the best way you can influence your children is by what you do. And certainly if most people can afford to give something, and I think it's, you know, whatever you give makes an effect on your children, and they want to grow up and do the same thing you've done. And then I got a quote here that I thought was kind of interesting, and might be apropos here. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery. But today is a gift. That is why it's called the present.
And thank you, Matt. You did a great job. If there's a question why several years ago we decided that the man to lead Hartsook into the long-term future is Matt Beem. You begin to get a taste of it just in his presentation today. I'm very proud of his leadership, very proud of how he's taken our company, and very proud of his support of something that we hold very much in common, and that is the growth of this movement, the growth of philanthropy. And so today, this is a little surprise to our three guests. One of the decisions we made several years ago is to be able to express ourselves to those individuals who we have seen and worked with and identified, and we started this in 2009, Adrian is a recipient of this, of not people who just give money away or just have a nice sense of philanthropy. Because that's good and that's important, but as you've heard from our presentations today, we're very interested in growing philanthropy dramatically. And so since 2009, we have periodically made gifts, made recognition of institutions and individuals. The head of the Kresge Foundation received an award from us for growing philanthropy when, in the 2008 crash, they extended their qualifications. Bill, I know, has worked with them a lot, to include community colleges, and before they hadn't included community colleges. The head of the National Association of Broadcasters, as they worked hard to try to bring minorities into the broadcasting community, received such an award. The head of an international child abuse prevention center with 100 centers across the country received such an award, and then there are several other, Feeding America, and different individuals. But the purpose of it is to say to these men and women that we want to grow philanthropy so we can meet all of these great needs. The gift that I would say that these two men and women has given are themselves. And I'm very proud to consider each of them a friend and I guess kind of a parent, Steve, on one end of it, just making sure I'm fit and shapely and everything else. So I appreciate that. So Matt's going to help me, and we have created as a result the Growing Philanthropy Award. It's been given to about 11 individuals since 2009, and we're going to give it to Henry, and we're going to give it to Jeanne, and we're going to give it to Bill. I'm just going to warn you, it's a two-piece award. I've had to pay for duplicates at times because people have stumbled over them. So, and Matt's going to help us with all of that. But the first goes to Henry Bloch. And you just stay there, Henry, and he's going to come to you. Or you can get up if you want. Can you get it, Matt? No. They got other awards. My God, they'll be here all night. Henry, we appreciate your engagement in our community, your commitment to our community, and how important you have of setting an outstanding representation for philanthropy in America and in Kansas City. Thank you. Yeah, see, they give it right back. I had one who thought it looked like a church plate. The second one goes to Jeanne Olofson. Jeanne and I have been friends through Avila and a couple others for some time. What I have found interesting about Jeanne, and she's talked about today, and it's true of others, but they have focused their philanthropy in a particular area. Henry talked about that as part of the legacy groups. I find that an interesting philosophical base, and so we want to honor her focus and her drive, and she and Tom and how they have taken their foundation and provided that level of support for those institutions. So. And, you know, and Henry, I appreciate your comment about William and your comment about the Dunn family. We're very proud as a company to have done, in our last count, about 600 projects with a member of the Dunn family, Bill, or one of the sons, or even a daughter-in-law or two as time goes on, and maybe a CEO once in a while, and all of that. So we're very proud of our work and our relationship with the Dunn family. I was thinking this morning, I have a corporate residence on the top of Wall Street Towers. Our offices are at Town Pavilion. Henry, I look down and I see the world headquarters of Bloch, H&R Bloch. But this morning I noticed something that I remember, and I can't remember, I think you and I were in a meeting together, Bill, in which somebody was telling us that their daughter, in looking at a construction crane, didn't call it a crane. They called it J.D. Dunn. And they'd say, that's a J.D. Dunn. And today, as you're building an apartment complex down, that crane swung around and there was a J.D. Dunn. And so I appreciate that, my friend.
Congratulate you and Avila for setting up a program, because so many people in our society are not aware of how important this program is to the future of society. Avila is probably one of the very unique colleges or universities that has set up this type of program. You may be number one, but thank you for what you've done.
Thank you, sir.